Hello, Caitlin. You're here. All we needed to do was get to this moment, and now we can just drink wine and enjoy each other's company and enjoy the company of all of our viewers.
Yes, we made it.
Yay!
On the internet.
Honestly, I do feel like it was very hard to make it this week. I don't know if you felt that way, but I definitely felt that way. I was like, oh man, it's a tough one.
In what way? Like busy week or?
Busy, lots of just, you know how they can get, like where weeks where you're just like, oh my God, this is the longest week of my life. When can I get to that moment of calm, which is what this feels like? Even though sometimes this doesn't, because where you prepare a lot for it, but I still feel like it's so much fun that I'm like, oh, this is like what I look forward to. So I'm glad that I'm here.
I like your earth.
Thank you. I made it myself.
I'm like,
I made it right before this episode.
Yeah, it looks awesome. Well, if you don't know, you are now tuning in to Import Taste Live with the two of us crazy
wine nerds.
Of us crazy wine nerds. So we are two best friends in different parts of that great earth that Britt has. And we tune in to this place each week in our respective apartments most of the time. Mine with a really terrible internet connection.
Mine with, I don't know. I don't know what's terrible about mine.
Do you remember when so for this longest time, we were trying to figure out why I was always blurry? Do you remember that at your house? How we were, did I cut out?
No, we were trying to figure out why you were always blurry.
Yeah. And then I was like, I don't know. It could be my camera. Maybe it's my internet. Or like, whatever. And then remember when we took a picture of us together on the episode? And I was like, I'm still blurry.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Okay. I was like, I'm not sure where this is going, but yeah.
What the heck is wrong? And we're like, what is wrong with me? I think it's just me. Like, I'm just a blurry person, maybe, in general.
I know. I thought that was so, like, you're not a blurry person. It is clearly your internet, but yeah.
Except for in that situation, I was blurry sitting right next to you in your own internet. So
I know. Sorry, everyone, that I was looking down. I just started a watch party on Facebook for our episode. So if you guys are on Facebook and you're in a group that you think would enjoy the show, we'd love it if you started a watch party. It really gets it out to a bigger audience. So in case you're like, come on, Britt, look at the screen. That's what I was doing. Love it if you did it too. Okay, cool. Then I get to ask you a question, or do we talk about what the episode is? Where should we start?
Question.
Okay, question. So it's kind of based on today's episode. So I kind of will just announce what the episode is, which is organic and biodynamic wines. It is Earth Day, as you all are aware. So we're celebrating the earth. So what is one thing that kind of is, it's a two-parter. So I think you can do it. What's one thing about like kind of the earth, our planet, that is devastating you right now? Just like thoughts that you're just like, oh God, I can't believe this is happening. This is one thing I'd love to change to help change our planet. And what's one thing that's giving you hope about what's happening in our environment and with the planet? 1, 2, 3, go.
Okay, so what I will say that is devastating me, it's really hard to pick one thing. And what I'm learning is that they're really interconnected. But I will say, microplastics. Do you know how many microplastics? There was a study at UCSD really recently, and I live in San Diego, so it's nearby. They were just taking samples of the ocean and trying to test them for microplastics. And I'm no scientist, so I don't know the exact amount. But basically, these plastics are so small, they're not even really visible to the eye, hence the micro. And they're in everything. They're in like every sample that they're pulling up. And it comes from plastics, of course, but you think like, oh, plastic water bottles and stuff like that. But, and this brings me to my like recent soapbox, is the fast fashion industry and all the clothes that we wear that are plastics. So it is so hard to think. You think about like cancer and all these other illnesses and things that people have, and the whole like supply chain just being so destructive, from the manufacturing all the way to the wearing, to the waste, to the landfills, all this stuff. And I think like it affects every person. It's like a human rights issue to have the fast fashion industry. I could go on about this forever. And I asked Britt earlier, like, do you think I'm being too preachy? And she was like, no, just talk about it. It's just really devastating. So I think that is like really scary when you think about like that we all have them in our bodies now, just because we can't find a water source in the world that doesn't really have microplastics in it. So that's fucking.
Oh, I was reading about how many microplastics we actually ingest, not even just in the ocean, but in our water supply. And it is a huge amount of microplastics that we're ingesting. I'm like, oh my God. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's what's like so insurmountable. It just seems like impossible to control. Even like these small little ways just seem impossible to make any difference in anything. So that's part one. It's a two-part answer. It's the microplastics and the fast fashion. And secondly, I will say that's giving me hope is, oh gosh, I don't have a lot of hope right now for the honestly, I think
I hope at the end to make it not so horrible, like gloom and doom. I was like, okay, I know that she's going to talk about something that's really devastating, so let's also finish it. It's like one of those compliment sandwiches. Here's a compliment, here's something horrible, here's another compliment to make you not feel bad about that horrible shit you're eating.
Yeah, I think I've just been in like doom and gloom territory lately. But, you know, I will say that I look back on our recent discussion with Mimi Castile, and also just a lot of the conversations that people are having, especially doing the research for this. Obviously, we're looking specifically at wine, but this is happening in other areas as well. I recently found a pretty cool app and like tuned into a community of people who are trying to eliminate fast fashion. And I think that's giving me some hope. The idea that there are other people out there who are committed to making these small changes, even if it is not glamorous, or even if it's not like they don't get to live the lifestyle that they want. They're committed to making those changes, like farming differently and buying clothes differently and disposing of things differently. And that, I think that is giving me hope. I just want that to be like billions more people.
Yeah. So one thing that's giving me hope that I heard about today was this company. I mean, I haven't really looked into it, but they're a like nutrition company or like some, I don't know. My friend gave me a like probiotic from them today. And I was like, yeah, like I was talking about plastics for some reason. I don't know why, probably because it's Earth Day. And he was like, oh, this company is really great. They're actually trying to create a substance or a organism or something that eats plastic and destroys it, like eats it not in a bad way. And I was like, I would like to invest in that company because because plastic is like indestructible. And so it's like, how can we, and we've put so much into the earth. How can we like start creating stuff? Like, let's use our brain power to get rid of it. We used our brain power to create it. Like, I think that we can use brain power to destroy it as well. So
that's smart. You know, it's crazy too, because I think like most of these changes are not such big changes, but people just don't care. If people cared enough about it as much as they cared about getting their Amazon shipments sent to them quickly, then we would have a solution over the weekend. You know, it's like, it's hard, and I sound super tree hugger, and I am super tree hugger in that, but it's like, if people actually just realized, I had a friend recently who was like, yeah, I know you've been reading a lot of those books, and I just don't want to read them because I know that they'll upset me. And I'm like, yeah, they will, but that's part of what needs to happen if people want to make a change, you know? So,
well, I mean, that's what I said to you this morning when you were like, oh, do you think it's going to be too preachy? And I'm like, well, things aren't going to change unless somebody talks about it. And then in addition to kind of what you were just saying about, you know, like people not caring and stuff like that. We've also been deceived, I think, by corporations and things like that to become reliant on these and to not know the difference. And so I think, one, it does have a lot to do with people not caring, but a lot of it also has to do with the deception that we've been led to, or even the hiding, where they hide it in things. Greenwashing. Let's talk about greenwashing, where companies are creating facades of environmentally friendly products when they're not. Like these are organizations that see that people actually do care about the earth, but they're like, I'm going to capitalize on your caring and not actually do anything to change it. So
yeah,
that's my soapbox for the day, other than talking about biodynamic wines.
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't even know what greenwashing was until a couple weeks ago. I was watching something and I was like, oh my, I mean, I think I knew the concept existed, but I never heard that term before.
Explain it a little bit better. I don't know if I did that.
Yeah, so greenwashing is basically like what you said, like companies recognize that people are trying to be more conscientious consumers, and then they market to those people without actually taking steps to make a better product. So there are a lot of clothing companies that do this. I've been learning this recently, where they talk about how sustainable they are and all these things, and then you actually look into their practices and they're not really at all. And it's just about making money. So you have to be cautious. Just because someone says that they are, doesn't mean that
they use a palette tone that looks green. Like part of me is like, oh my God, if I see another one of those green, beige, like kind of like terracotta palette tones that are trying to like make me think that they're a green company, I'm like, fuck you. Like, be transparent. That's how but anyway, and they're not transparent. So anyway, okay. Now let's talk about wine. Speaking of,
welcome to our Earth Day organic and biodynamic wine episode. If this has been too much for you, then the rest of it will probably also be too much for you. So this might be the moment where you leave us. Hopefully not, but we are doing organic and biodynamic wine today, and I'm very excited to talk about that. So
yes, thank you, McKenna. I just really want to talk about this really quick before we move on. Carbon footprint was marketed by oil companies to put the blame on individuals rather than corporations. And that was like what I was mentioning, is that really the people who are doing it, they're making us think, which we should be making our own choices and being more conscious. But corporations, rather than changing it, they're like, oh, we'll blame the consumer, even though we've created this whole environment where the consumer has no choice. They have no option to go outside of their lines. And then we'll make them feel bad for what they're doing. And when they reduce their footprint, it really has very little effect on the environment. Not that you should not reduce your footprint, but it has very little effect versus if a corporation reduced their carbon footprint, the effect that would have on it. Okay, now I'm done talking about that.
Yeah, you're not done talking for the whole episode, I'm sure.
I'll just be drinking the rest of this episode. I hope you're okay with that, Caitlin. You're in charge.
Okay, well, what are you drinking? That's a great segue. What are you drinking?
Well, okay. Should we talk about previews, reviews, and transition statements first?
Yeah, we're going to tell you what we're drinking.
What we're drinking.
Yeah, and then we're going to talk about organic wines, biodynamic wines, a bunch of other cool trivia, fun facts for you, definitions. And yeah, that's basically it for today.
Awesome. So I am drinking a Beaujolais. You can pull that up, Lauren. Beaujolais Village from La Palou. It's a 2019. So keeping it young, keeping it fresh. So La Palou, Jean-Claude La Palou, he is a very well-respected vigneron in the Beaujolais region, specifically for his natural and organic winemaking. So he is organic and transitioning into biodynamic. And I'll talk a little bit about that process and what that looks like. So just so you know, so he's transitioning into biodynamics, but he was one of the, he wasn't one of the Gang of Four, which are the four natural winemakers coming out of that, but he is very respected by them and is part of that community. And I loved it. I was reading this thing. He was talking about, I don't know if he was talking about, this person was talking about how his modesty kept him from reaching out and asking, trying to get guidance with this. But he went to wine school and he was like, okay, I'm getting rid of all these additives that I was taught about in wine school to make my wines great. And I'm going to do it this way. But he didn't know where he was going. And he was just you could just see what happens in the land when you start not doing that and you start treating it in a natural way. And so It wasn't until his wines started like getting lots of recognition for how good they were, even though they were not getting all these additives that other wines were, that he really got connected into that community. This wine was from his family. So his grandfather and his father all farmed this land, but they sold it to co-ops. So it wasn't until he came in that he's like, nope, we're going to produce our own wine. So he's really old vines. They're like 45 years old. These vines are 45 plus. And then it's on like granite, a bedrock of granite, which as if you've tuned into our Beaujolais episode, or if you haven't, you should go back and rewatch it. But granite is like what makes Beaujolais great, why it really has thrived south of Burgundy is because the soil really changes there into this granite soil. And so it's a delicious wine. I'm loving it. What are you drinking, Caitlin?
Okay, so I'm drinking, Lauren has this photo. It's really an awesome label. I feel like you have to see it. Because
I kind of wish they were unicorns, but otherwise, yes.
I actually thought they were for a while, and then I was like, oh yeah, upon closer examination, they just look like horses. But
especially if like the like lightning was hitting their like top, like a lightning rod was hitting the like the horn.
That's so good. Yeah. So it's called it's Vinovore Electric Lightning, a Petnat Rosé. So it's funny because it's like we had kind of a free range of what we wanted to drink today, and Britt went with the Beaujolais, and I went with the Pet, like just things that we just love. Like I love sparkling wine.
I was like, okay, something I already love. Let's just find a producer who's following in the range of what I love.
That's exactly what I did too. So this one is called the Pink Pony, and it is it's really interesting. So this is really they have a very funny description on the back, which is why I included it on here as well. So it's like passionate and free running, frisky and flirty. There isn't a soul that wouldn't want to drink with you. It's like goes on and on. The mood is whimsical, vivacious, and cultish, which is funny because it's like ponies, you know? Okay. So
cultish that way, not cultish. I was thinking like cultish. Cultish.
Which is like a young horse, so just like playful. So I picked this wine, because I wanted to drink something totally different from Brit, to just give just to show like that these kinds of wines can be found in many different ways. So this winery is a winery out of Italy, out of the north of Italy, and it's a mother-son team. So it's a female winemaker, and I was like, finally, I finally could find one. It's a female winemaker, and then it's cool because it's imported into this shop in LA where this woman is connected. And I've done a little bit of research on this to try to figure out like,
get this from LA?
No, it's here too. Like it's connected to this woman who decided to kind of import it into the States, and has a wine shop in LA. And then I think it kind of comes from there. And then I also bought it from a female wine shop. So I feel like this is one of the only wines I've ever had where I think the whole supply chain is basically female from what I can tell. So it's like Coley Den Haan is the person who I think that she's like maybe either buying the grapes or buying the wines and then like distributing them. So it's a little bit murky. I can't tell exactly how it got to my local wine shop, but it is it's an indigenous wine grape for the area. And this winery, they're very big on indigenous wine grapes. That means grapes.
Tell me what the grape is.
Yeah, it's called like Langarosi.
Longasi or whatever. I saw it I was like reading it. I was like, wait, am I reading that right? Okay.
Yeah, so it's called Langanasi, 100% Langanasi, which I had never heard of before this. And it's from Emilia-Romagna. How do you say that, Britt?
No. That was pretty good. That was good.
They're terrible.
Which is where Parma is. So Parmesan comes out of there, and so does like the best balsamic vinegar in like the world comes out of there, and so does prosciutto. Those are like ones that are designated from like their specific region. Though like prosciutto and Parmesan, like true Parmesan, comes from Emilia-Romagna.
Yeah, so that's why you're getting like some good shit from that area because they know their
food.
Getting
some good shit that goes with food.
Yeah. Exactly. And it really is true. Like I mentioned some of the tasting notes. I've had this wine a couple times now, and I mentioned some of the tasting notes, and it is definitely like one of the weirdest sparkling wines I've had. It is not like, it's not what you think of when you think of rosé. It has got like like an orange pith, sort of like they say orange bitters, but it's definitely got like some funky, not funky like bready band-aidy notes, but like funky, like heavier. It's delicious.
Nice. Good to know. Mine definitely has like that. It definitely has like a bit of a crunchy red fruited note. We'll call it red cherries and cranberries, but also has like this kind of cement quality to it, which I know is like, I believe that it was fermented in cement. I have to go back and look at my notes again and see, but it could also be from the granite. But kind of like that, like kind of wet rocks. But like after a rainstorm or something is like what it smells like a little bit. Anyway, please, everyone, we love to hear from you in the comments. Thank you, everyone who's already commenting. That's why we do it on this platform, is really so that we can interact with you more. So please tell us what you're drinking, tell us what you're tasting, ask any questions throughout. Sometimes we'll pull them up, sometimes we won't. You saw I pulled up McKenna's because it was so good and I just had to address it. But anyway, so definitely don't be a stranger. We're not strangers.
We're not strangers. We're friends. We're all friends here.
We're all friends here. That should be our new slogan. We're all friends here.
We can add it to our list of slogans. Lauren, yeah. put that in the note.
Steven. But yes, Lauren, add it to the notebook.
Stephen Noel. Stephen Marie. Okay.
Is your middle name Noel?
Yes, I was thinking of like the way that so we're making a dumb joke referencing a podcast that we love where they always yell at their producer whose name is Steven. So in this case, I'm joking and I'm yelling at Lauren, but I know Lauren's middle name, so I can call her by that. Okay. So what we're going to do today, the main agenda is to break down organic and biodynamic. So I will say, I feel like if you are a regular viewer, we kind of gave things to you backward by having Mimi on our episode before we talked about these things. But if we were putting them in order, it would be probably organic, biodynamic, Mimi Castile's
regenerative farming. Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start with, we're going to kind of go backward. So add this to the top of your notes, not the bottom. Okay. So first, a couple notes on what the heck any of this stuff means. So what the heck is organic? It'd be interesting too if any of you have experiences about trying to buy organic or biodynamic wines, we'd love to hear them, because mine was basically I went to a shop where they mostly only carry those things. So it was fairly easy, but I know it's not always very obvious, which we'll talk about.
I'm a big wine researcher, I'll be honest. Like I will look up wines before I go to shops because one, who has time for that? Like I don't have time to go to a shop that doesn't have the wine that I'm looking for. So I'm like, hell no. And so I'm like, I'll go onto a shop's website and I literally just type in their search bar, like biodynamic, and see what comes up. I'm like, let's look through their selection. Great. That's the one I will be getting. Granted, I work at the wine shop where I got this one.
Yeah, that's smart if you can, but I'm the opposite. I'm the person who walks into the wine shop and says, show me what you have. Female winemaker, organic, biodynamic, whatever it is. So, and
then you never get what you were looking for.
And then half the time it goes poorly. But that's a good lesson in just, being adventurous. So, okay, in order to understand organic wines, you have to understand what is not organic. So to start, I want to just say, when we're not talking about organic wines, people refer to those wines as conventional. And I heard somebody say that they didn't like that term, conventional, because in essence, we have been making more organic wines historically, and conventional is like a newer kind of more more in the winery chemical way of doing things. So they liked to call them industrial wines, which I think it should be called because that's much more accurate for what you're getting when you're shopping like mainstream wines, industrial. But I'm going to probably continue to call them conventional wines just to make it really simple here, but I still wanted to make that clear. So conventional wines versus organic wines. So conventional wines are what you're going to find at the grocery store. They're pretty mass produced. They are, I'm sorry, am I cutting out? I feel like Brit. Okay, I was like Brit froze, so then I was nervous. Okay. So conventional wines are going to be like mainstream. It's like you think about the movie theaters, you go see mainstream movies at the theaters, unless you go to the independent theater and you got your, specialty, whatever.
Quite So
Kind of analogy. Yeah. Okay. So, interestingly enough, many of the pesticides and herbicides that are used today, I learned this in a podcast that Britt and I both listened to, were developed from nerve gas technology from World War I.
Oh
which
my
is like,
God. When I heard that, I was disturbed. I like stopped it and I'm like, someone has to be near to hear that. Like, I'm like, I need to tell somebody else about this too.
yeah, well, it's going to get more nightmarish for you.
I'm sure I interrupted you.
So many of the pesticides and herbicides that are used today in conventional or industrial wines were developed from technology from World War I nerve gas technology. I think I like jumbled that up, but basically like really weird, creepy stuff you really don't want to be drinking. So basically the goal of organic farming, which is a very, very small percentage, I think I read that it was like 4% of the wine industry, something very small, is organic farming. And organic farming works to see the whole farm as an organism. So the humans, the crops, the plants, all of those things are one working organism. The word organic actually derives from this idea of an organism. So that's something to kind of keep in mind as we talk about this. Organic wine growers, ecological biodiversity. So this might sound familiar if you listen to our regenerative farming episode. They want a lot of things like plants to grow in and around the vineyard in order to attract beneficial insects and pollinators. And there's like an embrace of the general ecological system. I think Lauren has a series of 3 pictures. I think the first one is me taking a picture in Spain. And it is, I know it might take her a minute to get there, but it's like a conventional versus organic farm. And then, yeah, that one. So that first one. Yeah, so pull that up real fast and then the other 2. So this is a terrible picture, but me standing there taking a picture of this road and
will you let me guess really quick?
Yeah.
Is the right side organic?
Yes, the right side is organically farmed, and you can tell that it's extremely green because it's like November. It's November in Spain when I took this, so the vineyards are not very full of fruit. They've already been harvested for the year. But the right side is an organically farmed vineyard, and you can see all the green. The left side, you can see like the tractor marks or whatever, and it's very like just dirt. So then I have 2 pictures, Lauren, if you want to pull up the ones after this. I have one of each of these sides just so you can kind of see, just to get a glance. This is like, you can tell this is very farmed. It's picked over. It's clean on the ground. There's nothing growing there. And then if you show the other one, there's like a robust ecosystem that's under those grapes. So that is kind of a visual of what you can see. I thought this was so cool. I was standing in that spot just thinking like, oh my gosh, 2 different people's vineyards farmed so differently, and you can tell just aesthetically. So that's kind of that whole ecosystem that's promoted. Okay, the US has one rule for organic labeling, or they have one system, which is kind of nice because some other countries have a little bit more of a convoluted system. It is regulated by the USDA, just like every other farming practice. So it's pretty specific, and I went down a rabbit hole today reading all of these pages on the USDA website about organic farming. Basically, they define organic wine is made without using prohibited substances or genetic engineering. So no genetic engineering and none of the prohibited substances. Generally, the prohibited substances are things that are synthetic. So that's like the general rule. There are some things that are allowed in farming that are synthetic, but they are seen as like not harmful to people. So those things are allowed. But organic refers to both the farming and the winemaking in general. I know this is getting a little technical, but okay.
My section.
I think it should be opposite. So the interesting thing is that organic. So one thing I learned about this is that since wine is basically like a crop, people think of it as a crop, right? It has the same standards as other crops for organic, except one thing. Do you know what that is, Britt? Take a guess.
It has to list sulfites on the
yes.
label. Yeah. I mean, I did know that because I know that. And it's so funny. I had a conversation with someone today. I'm like, do you know that there's more sulfites in your dried apricots than there are in your glass of wine? So shut the fuck up about sulfites.
Oh yeah. I have a whole thing to talk about sulfites. So that'll
come later.
Actually, really basically right now.
Okay. So, that will come right now.
Yes. Right now I'm going to talk about sulfites. So this is one of my rants in the wine world. And I found about people always come to me when I'm doing tastings and they say like, oh, I don't drink red wine because I get headaches. I'm allergic or like I am sensitive to sulfites. And I try not to tell them that they're full of shit, but it is true. 1% of the population has a sensitivity or allergy, debatable, to sulfites. So there are people out there. So I will say, if you are one of those people that there is actually something to that. However, wine naturally produces sulfur dioxide. That is something that happens naturally in wine. It is impossible to have a wine without sulfur dioxide or sulfites. However, in organic labeling, somehow the wine industry has been targeted for including whether or not they have sulfites, even though foods that you regularly consume will have many, many more sulfites than you would expect. So they are also commonly added to wine. So not only are they naturally occurring in wines, they're commonly added to stop fermentation or to preserve wine. The same reason that they're used for other things. Do you have a question? Oh, I thought you were.
No, but
Okay.
I was going to say the same thing. It's like, it's a preservative, and it's a natural preservative, and it's also an added preservative that's also natural, but you know, stop.
So this is, Lauren has a chart, and I know she's like itching to pull this chart up. So I think these are so great. Can you make it full screen just so we can like see it a little bit better? So if you look at this chart on the left-hand side, those are dry red wines. That tiny, tiny little baby spot is a dry red wine. Amount of sulfites, they're usually parts per million, which is what the ppm is. Candy is right next to it. Jam. We've got commercial wines, those industrial wines. So that is definitely a higher amount. If you're buying those kinds of wines, you will have more sulfites in them because people aren't putting as much time and consideration to the wines that they're producing. They just want to make a profit. That's my 2 cents. Soda, which if you drink soda, has about the same as commercial wines. Packaged meats, prepared soup, frozen juices, French fries, double or triple that frozen juices amount. And then dried fruit doubles that. Also canned tuna and other canned meats like that also have tons of parts per million for sulfites. So
I love canned tuna. Can you stop?
I love canned tuna. And the thing is, sulfites really aren't going, they're for 99% of the population, they are not bothersome. There's a lot of other reasons why, if you think you're allergic to sulfites in general, there are things that might be causing that allergy, which we can talk about later, but I don't want to like bore everyone so much.
The person who leads my blind wine tasting group that I do, he's like a wine director at a 2 Michelin star restaurant. He wants to get a shirt made that says sulfur is sexy and wear it into a wine bar because he was like, or the natural wine bar. He wants to bring it. And I was thinking, I'm like, oh, I feel like a funny one too. I've been meaning to talk to him. I'm like, sulfur is my safe word. That like, oh, sulfur, like, gone too far.
I mean, I don't think anyone's like, oh my gosh, I love sulfites. It's not like, it's just one of those things that I think has weirdly been targeted for the wine industry that is really overrepresented for the actual effects that it has. So here's some interesting things about sulfites too. Typically, red wines have about 50 to 350 parts per million. So you saw that chart, like those conventional wines or commercial, whatever, industrial wines are kind of right in the middle of that. White wines have like double the amount of sulfites. So when people come to me and they say, I know, they say, I can't drink red wine because I get headaches from the sulfites. And I'm like, no. The white wines that have much more sulfite. It takes more to preserve them because they're more sensitive to the sun. All these things.
And you think about how tannin acts as a natural preservative. And if white wines don't have it, how are you going to preserve it? Like tannins and acid tend to be the biggest preservatives, like natural ones that are existing. So if you don't have that tannin, then you're going to need sulfates.
That's a great transition too, because you're so right. I learned also that high acid wines have less sulfites.
Because you need less preservatives. Mm-hmm.
And that's a great, yeah. So I love high acid wines. And I remember when I made the switch from like grocery store wine, and all wines are welcome here. We don't care what you're drinking. We're just trying to tell you the facts so that if you're at this, if you're having headaches or something, you can kind of be aware of this. But when I made the switch to drinking more of these like organic biodynamic wines and wines, regardless of sulfites, I never check whether they have or don't have sulfites, but I drink a lot of high acid wines. I feel like I don't have as many headaches. The alcohol's lower. There are a lot of benefits to that. So just some like trivia, you know, next time you're at a party and you can pull out some like wine party trick facts. There you go. White
Or
wine.
you bring a bottle to a party and you're like, man, I don't want everyone to have a headache tomorrow. Bring a high acid, low ABV wine.
High acid, a low ABV, and
a jug of water.
Yes, exactly. So, okay. There is a qualification in organic that's made, it's called made with organic grapes, and doesn't get the same stamp that the other ones do, but it has slightly less standards. Actually, the sulfites are the things that make a difference. So so Lauren has this chart, this picture too, if she wants to pull it up, just to show you what the label is for the stuff. So conventional wines are on the left, 350 parts per million sulfites. The middle is made with organic grapes. And then the furthest right with organic has a restriction on how many sulfites can be added. So it's like 10 parts per million. That's pretty awesome. Okay, I know my time is running out, so I'm going to try to hurry up. So the last couple things I'll say so what is not allowed in organic grapes? So the two main things I will tell you, I have a picture of this, a list, a screenshot from the USDA or the FDA website. So Lauren, if you want to pull that up. So these things are not allowed in
organic. Oh my God, arsenic isn't allowed in my wine.
Yeah, arsenic, strychnine, tobacco dust with nicotine. These are not allowed in your organic wines, but you know what that means? The rest of your
allowed in your industrial wines.
Yep. So I just thought that is ash from manure burning. This is like straight off the website. It is horrifying. I don't know how to pronounce half these things, but I just felt like if you want to know there's no arsenic in your wine, you got to buy organic. That's like so startling to me. Okay. So any chemicals used in a certified organic wine cannot have an adverse effect on the environment or on human health. There is a reason why a lot of people do not mark their wines organic, despite maybe having organic practices in the vineyard and in the winery, and that's usually about money. So I won't get too much into that, except for that it's expensive to certify your vineyards, and it's also expensive to keep it up because you have to have constant regulation of those things. So some people who are committed to doing that still don't have that stamp of organic. Like mine does not have a stamp on mine. It's also from Italy, so I didn't go into like Italian rules.
Mine doesn't either, and mine is organic biodynamic, and it's from France. So just so everybody knows,
it can be very hard to tell sometimes. So that's my rant.
They are certified, and they still choose not to put it on there.
Oh, okay, interesting. So yeah, that could be a choice too. A lot of times people might shy away from things that are stamped with those things. They might think they're gross, but that does not mean that they're gross. So I will let Britt talk about biodynamic. I feel like I dominated this already. Hopefully you got some really good, interesting information. Take it away.
Don't worry, I'm going to dominate the rest of this episode. Well, I did want to also touch a little bit on conventional or industrial wine practices and kind of what problems are led to in the vineyard that we're trying to correct with organic and biodynamic. So in this podcast that me and Caitlin listened to, I listened to like this person who gave this really wonderful podcast. It was on Wine for Normal People, but it was actually an interview by Monty. What was his last name?
Walden?
Yep, Monty Walden, who wrote a book about biodynamics. And he talked about, so if you think about smoking and industrial or conventional wine is like smoking 5 packs a day. Sustainable wine is like smoking 2 packs a day. Organic wine is you quit smoking, and biodynamic wine is you quit smoking and you're eating right. So let that sink in when you're thinking about what you're drinking. But anyway, so as far as industrial winemaking, kind of problems that it creates in the vineyard, there are 3 main problems. Soil fertility is one of them. So the soils are no longer fertile. They're not able to produce the nutrients that are really needed to grow crops. So one, you have to add a lot of nutrients because your soils are no longer producing them when you do industrial farming. One, the vines have decreased their pesticide and weed resistance. So the lands, the soils, when you're conventional farming, when you're industrial farming, we're using the same word for the same thing, or the different words for the same thing. The vines are being more susceptible to pests because you're taking out all of these like natural things that are their protectants. So then you need to add them back in. And then banal wine tastes. So when people talk about wines, when wine nerds talk about wines, they're talking about terroir. They're talking about place. They're talking about this wine tastes like what it is to walk through that vineyard. When you are commercially farming, when you are industrially farming, you are taking out terroir from the picture. You are creating wine. You're adding in things to make wine. And so that is something that is these three issues that are happening from that. And that is the answer that's happening from biodynamic and organic winemaking. So one thing I wrote down, industrial farming has large outputs. They put out a lot of wine, but they need large inputs in order for that to happen. Inputting of these nutrients that they are depriving. So in order for them to make these huge quantities of wine to put them at low prices, they're like, okay, we gotta hit it with all these chemicals. So just something to think about. Okay, so now I've talked a little bit about industrial farming and conventional farming because I also wanted to add to your idea. One problem that winemakers and people have to fight is that consumers believe there's a perception that all wine is organic because it's coming from grapes. There's this perception that it's like, oh, this is natural. Like this is better than my soda. Like, I mean, that's what everyone thinks. Like, I'm sure it is better than soda. Like, let's maybe, but
I've got one word.
I wonder if they regulate whether arsenic can be in soda, but they don't regulate whether arsenic can be in wine. So consumers think, oh, I'm drinking a natural product because I'm drinking wine, but it's not true. When you're drinking conventional wine, you are drinking like other things. Arsenic could be one of them, apparently. So what the goal of biodynamic wine is to work with nature rather than against nature. Like Caitlin was talking about, organic comes from the idea of organism, that the farm is an organism. It's very similar in biodynamics. In fact, you cannot be certified biodynamic if you are not certified organic. So it's kind of like the square and the rectangle. I always like to use that analogy. A square can be a rectangle, but a rectangle can't be a square. So think about like that. Biodynamic is that square and organic is that rectangle. So it's like, oh, I have to be a rectangle and I also can be a square, but not. So with organic, you're not always biodynamic, but with biodynamic, you're always organic. And I'm talking specifically about certification. Go ahead. Yes.
You're taking a step up from where I just was and you're adding on to it.
Exactly. So the idea, like the main thought behind biodynamic wines is that the fertility of the land all comes from within your farm. Like you are self-sustaining. Everything that is brought into the farm everything that's adding to these vines came from the farm. So biodynamics was like, why it gets a bad rap is because it's seen as like voodoo practices, witchy ways. But it does kind of have that a little bit with some things that I'll discuss in just a moment. But like, I think that that's why it has this perception and we should like work to fight that perception. But it was started by Rudolf Steiner, who is an Austrian. And it was started as an answer to World War I. And then right afterwards, the pandemic, the influenza pandemic. So like, we're kind of there right now. But he was like, okay, all these things are happening. People are suffering, especially with the influenza. How can I how can I solve that problem? And so he came up with this idea of biodynamics. And what's really interesting is, you know how Caitlin's like, oh, okay, it's organic, then it's biodynamic. Biodynamic actually existed before organic existed as a designation. And it was designated first in 1924. So it predates organics. The main thing that you want to know about biodynamics, there's lots of things to know about biodynamics, but one of them is like these natural sprays that happen. So rather than, spraying your vineyard with these things to protect them against pests, Lauren, maybe you can bring up that picture of Literai. They're a great farm that I just love. They're a vineyard that makes just like wonderful things, but yep, that's it. So there's different preparations. And this one, they're preparing stinging nettles. And so they're steeping them right now. They're creating them into a tea. And I think there's one more picture of this. Maybe there wasn't. I have no idea. But okay, cool. So there are 9 preparations that are used in biodynamics. One is the cow manure, and they also call it cow horn. The other is quartz or silica. And then there are 7 plants that are used. yarrow, chamomile, stinging nettle, oak bark, dandelion, valerian, and horsetail. So those are all of the kind of preparations that are used. They're either mixed into the compost or they're sprayed onto the soil or onto the plants. So I'm really going to talk mainly about two of them. Cow manure, the cow horn being kind of the most important one. So what they do is they take a cow horn, and Caitlin, I think, has a photo of this that she put on here. They take a cow horn and they stuff it with cow manure. And they believe, not like you think, okay, well, what's the difference between that and just manure? Apparently, there's like 400 more organisms that develop when you put it in a cow horn versus not putting it in a cow horn. So they let this, they bury it over the winter. And then when summer comes, they put it on the land. I think I just said that right. I think that one's buried in the winter, put on in the summer. Where the other one, the silica, the quartz, is also done in a cow horn, but that one's buried over the summer and put on over the winter. And that one's kind of interesting. What I like about that one is that the silica, like think about its reflecting power and stuff like that. So it's buried in the summer. So it's getting all that, they believe it's getting all that sunshine and stuff like that. And then they sprayed on the plants to kind of bring that reflecting in, bring that sunshine power to the plants during the winter. So anyway, none of these preps are patented. They wanted to make them all free to anyone. So your grandma could make it. Your child could probably make them. And they're done in a very low usage. And in that low usage, it's like a homeopathic use. It's not like to cure anything. It's supposed to be to create an overall healthiness. When Rudolf Steiner first did it, he felt like it was a remedy for the arrested spiritual development of his peers. He was like, he felt like his peers were not living a spiritual life anymore, or not like living. And he was like, you know how we can change that? Is we can reconnect them with the land. And I don't know about you, but that is when I feel the most at tune with my spiritual self, is when I'm in nature. So he was like, you know what we need to do is we need to imbibe our food with this natural, we're losing our connection to the earth. And to create that, we need to start at the beginning of what we're eating, and we need to connect that back to the earth. So by connecting that back to the earth, then we will in turn heal ourselves. I love it. I'm here for it.
I read something where this MW, which is a master of wine, Roger Bromrick, was talking about biodynamic wines. And I don't think he was a fan. He was kind of like, whatever, but his quote was that it combines organic methods with faith-based beliefs. And I was like, okay, I guess I didn't think of it that way, but it's like the faith of nature, you know?
Yes. Well, okay, so then let's talk a little bit further. One thing that I thought was crazy. So the person who is credited as the father of chemical farming was a German chemist named Baron Justus von Liebig. And he is the person who basically created the first fertilizer, because they believe he talked about this idea of limitation or restriction. Basically, the plant, whatever they're limited by, whatever resource or nutrient they're getting the least of, then they can't use all the other ones. So let's put that nutrient back into the land so then they can utilize all the other nutrients, which is a fucking lie. What he didn't know when he started this, and they later learned, is that plants can really, so they started putting nitrogen, because that was something that plants were really lacking, putting nitrogen back into the soil. But plants can only absorb about 10 to 15% of nitrogen. And so the rest of it turns into gases and gets released. And nitrogen is actually worse for the planet than carbon. So like Mimi was saying, love Mimi, she was saying, is that our biggest, one of our biggest problems is industrial farming, and that's where we need to change things, because that can change everything else. So think about if, as an industrial farmer, you're putting nitrogen back into the soil because you're like, oh, my plant's not getting enough nitrogen, but then your plant can only absorb 10%. And the rest of that 90% is getting released into the environment, which is worse than carbon. Okay, that's a lot. So now let's talk a little bit about where the witchiness comes in and where people are very like, they're like, no, you're like, okay, I've been following you so far. I'm okay with biodynamics at this point. Now you're not going to be okay with it. So let's talk about that. So biodynamics follows the moon. And I've also heard it called moon farming, which I'm like, oh my gosh, if you called it moon farming, I feel like people would just be like, yes, I'll be into the moon farming. But it follows the moon. And if you think about how the moon affects the tides, it affects the tides very strongly. And think about farming, how much water that uses, how much water is in the soil, how much water is in the land. And so the belief behind biodynamics is that the moon has different cycles, and it creates different cycles in the soil. It creates different cycles in the plant. And
I think that's true.
What?
That's true, right? The moon has different cycles. I'm on board. That part's true.
That part's true. But then to believe that it affects your farming, I like, part of me is like, okay, people don't like, I'm trying to appeal to they're like, okay, yeah, it affects the tides. So maybe it also can affect the water that's in the rest of our land. And so there is, different times of the year. Like even Caitlin posted about like, this is a great day for drinking wine because she was following the biodynamic calendar. And the biodynamic calendar is this idea of like different times of the year, actually different times of the month, that it's better for different organs of the plant is what they call it. And the organs that they're talking about in the plant are the roots, the leaves, the flowers, and the fruits, or the seeds is another term. And what that actually refers to is when the moon hits different zodiac, like different constellations. So maybe you guys know your sign. If you do, put it in the comments. I know my sign and I love it. And me and Caitlin are sister signs because we're on the very opposite sides of the chart, which I know people are going to be like, yeah, of course, these like witches, like other signs. But anyway, so I'm a Gemini, but different ones relate to different signs. So the root relates to earth signs. So if you're an earth sign, root days. There we go. Bring it up, Lauren. Bring up that chart.
And everybody can figure out where they stand on this.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard. You can make
I'm just going to kind of explain it a little bit. Root days are earth. I don't like that you put the thumbs down, but yes, earth days. But root days, it's not this is a tasting chart. So Caitlin's saying maybe on these days it doesn't taste that great, but on those other days. So I actually was hearing that, oh yeah, Pisces, Aries, and Libra, that Aries is probably taking over the conversation. I don't know who the Aries is over there, but anyway. So earth days, your wines might taste a little earthier, a little bit like earthier than usual. Flower days, fruit days, I hear are the best. Flower days, like, leaf days, I hear that they taste and smell a little bit more green, like herbaceous or like vegetal. But they also correspond to different things that you can be doing in the vineyard, in the garden, in your farming practices. But they also correlate to, so root days, if you're an earth sign, that's when it's going in front of those constellations, the moon is. So you all know what your signs are as for that. But what that's referring to is the sun moving through those constellations. So the sun takes a whole year, and that's why each month is a different one. But when they're talking about the biodynamic calendar, that's the moon moving through those constellations. So it only takes 1 month for the moon to move through those constellations. So the moon moves through those like earth signs. Those are root days. The moon moves through fruit signs. Those are which ones are those? Those are fire signs. Flower day. It's a flower day today. And I'm an air sign. So hell yeah, air signs.
Is it flower day or fruit day?
It was a flower day. That's what you posted. You posted it.
I thought it was a fruit day.
I'm pretty positive you posted a flower day. So I'm going to.
Well, I read that flower days are great days to drink a lot of like aromatic whites, or, like, flowery wines, and then fruit days are really good for just regular wines. So,
yeah. And then leaves refer to water. So anyway, so these are kind of like how biodynamics works. And then also they talk a lot about as the moon moves closer to the earth versus further based on where it's moving around in the rotation of the earth. It's either like when it's closer in rotation, as it's closer to this earth, it's actually drawing out more water from the ground, from the soil. So those tides are coming out stronger. And as it's further away, it's actually not. And so depending on that, it's like, think about like, okay, do I want my plant? Someone was telling me like leafy fruit or leafy vegetables, you don't want to pull on like days when the moon is really close because it's full of water. And those are when you want to pull out like root vegetables because you want them to be plump. So, I mean, these are kind of the witchiness things. Maria Thun was a German who created the kind of the biodynamic calendar that we all know, or we all now know, but the one that's most respected. And she did it in a different way than anyone else had. So a lot of people are like, oh, flower day, root day, leaf day, seed day, flower day. You know, it was just like one after another. But what she actually did was analyze how big the constellations were. So how long it would take the moon to move through them. So like Caitlin posted, at this time, it's moving, I believe it was to a flower day. She says it's to a fruit day. But at this time, it's moving to a different day. And that's because the constellations are different sizes. So it takes different amount of times for the moon to move through that constellation.
If you didn't,
go ahead.
If you didn't my post, then it was basically assuring you that this is an excellent time to be drinking your wine. That's what it said. It said today, April 22nd at 6 o'clock to 7 to 8 to 9 is excellent for wine. So you are in a good situation.
You're in that perfect time. Well, I'm very curious, Caitlin. What's your sign? Are you
curious?
Yeah, I know what your sign is, but what does it fall in? Is it a fire sign, an earth sign, a water sign? Fire. Me and you are both good days for drinking wine, which is probably why this came about, because I am an air sign, which relates to the flower, to flower, and you're the fruit. But I was thinking, I didn't know which ones correlated to which at the time, and I'm like, what do I think that a Gemini, like which one does that relate to? I'm like, it's definitely not a root sign, because I don't know if you know me, but I am not grounded at all in my life. And air signs are supposed to be like not grounded. They're like, woo, and air and fire go really good together because fire can't exist without air.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, a couple things to sum up, I'll just add to. If you've ever heard of the Farmer's Almanac, which you probably have, and it's like eerily good at predicting when's going to be good harvest and when aren't. Like people, even my mom, who is like not like witchy woman at all, is like, the Farmer's Almanac is amazing. It is also based on lunar cycles. So it's not totally far off to be like this, there's some connection to the moon to have to do with that.
It's not far off, but part of me is like, I'm down with the Farmer's Almanac, putting it in a way where people don't realize that they're following the lunar cycle. I'm like, okay, sure, follow it. Just don't think you are, by all means.
Yeah. Okay. And then you might be wondering like, well, are these wines disgusting? Are organic wines gross? Are biodynamic wines gross? Well, a couple things to say about that. So biodynamic soils have been tested against non-organic soils. So again, biodynamic and organic are like besties in there. And they showed greater disease suppression and a decrease in compaction and added organic material. So basically, organic and biodynamic soils are better at fighting off diseases by themselves. Britt kind of mentioned that, like you strip away their natural ability to fight diseases in industrial farming, and in organic and biodynamic, you allow them to fight off those diseases yourself. It's like your human immune system. If you like strip everything out, then your body can't fight anything, but you like let your body have some of those probiotics, then your body can actually fight those off. And then
I also think about like biodiversity, which is what you're taking out of the land when you're doing industrial farming. You're removing things because you're like afraid of them. But what you really need, like Mimi talked about, like that big kind of community of things that is actually what's going to help protect your vines. But anyway, continue.
Well, and then I read this really fascinating study by the UCLA Anderson Review. They did an analysis of conventional, so conventional meaning industrial, versus organic and biodynamic farming. And basically they taste tested wines. So they blind taste tested wines. People were testing, it was in France. The people who were testing them did not know where they came from. And the biodynamic and organic wines won out over the non-biodynamic and organic wines. So that's just proof to you in a blind tasting that people have said if you can farm organically and biodynamically, then you are better at your job and you're better at farming and you're better at producing wine because you're pulling out more of those nuances. And it's just like a higher standard that you have to live up to. So even in a taste test, they come out on top. Recently, that was like a recent, UCLA, believe them or don't, but I believe them.
I believe them.
I believe them.
We don't have really much time left, but I will just say natural wines is a very broad category, and it might be organic, it might be dynamic, biodynamic, or it might be none of those, and they are just greenwashing. But anyway, so natural wines still can be in that, but it also can be in that category where they're like, oh, we're organic practicing, we're biodynamic, but we're not going to pay this huge fee just to get certification. So something to think about, and definitely watch we had a past episode all about natural wines when we had Chris Renfro on the episode. So if you are looking to find out more information about natural wines, that's a good spot to look. Okay, Caitlin, should we move on to what you want to eat and drink with your wine?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this wine I feel like would go with anything. It's so delicious. The first time I had it, I was with like two of my best girlfriends who had all been recently vaccinated also. And we were like drinking wine in the sunshine at a wine bar we hadn't been to in 18 months. And it was just like, or whatever, 15 months, I don't know, 13 months with some like a cheese board and some empanadas and a flatbread. And honestly, it went with everything. I just say sunshine and some Brit pop and some cheese boards and some good friends. It's fucking fantastic. I love it. It's delicious. Affordable.
You want to know what my wine goes with?
Yes.
Activism for the earth. If you want to save the planet, I think that this wine goes really good with it. So I highly recommend. 10 out of 10 would drink again.
It's so good. What do you want to listen to with your wine?
Well, since mine is that biodynamic category, I had to go a little witchy. I didn't do Witchy Woman because I'm pretty sure I did that on our Halloween episode. But so I went with Van Morrison Moon Dance. Hope you love it. Hope you're in.
I love that song.
So good. And I just feel like, this wine's dancing under that moon. What do you want to listen to?
Oh, okay. Well, I will say it probably isn't necessarily the best thing with this wine, but this wine's so versatile and go with anything. I picked an Old Dirty Bastard, Shimmy Shimmy Yeah. So Lauren can put that on. Why?
I wish it was louder. Hey, Caitlin, do you like it raw?
Oh, baby, I like it raw. So if I hope you know why I picked that song, but it says, "Oh, baby, I like it raw," like 100 times. And it's an old throwback song. It's so good. I like my wine raw. I want it just like wines fermented in a vat and then put in my bottle and into my glass. That's what I want.
Hell yeah. Okay, Caitlin, what are we talking about next week?
Okay, so next week we have a guest on our show. We are talking. Yeah. I mean, hopefully we have a guest. We're still trying to get that worked out. But we are talking about Amador County. So Amador, just to give you a sneak preview, is a region. Yep, Amador Wines. It's a region up east of Sacramento area, east of like Napa and Sonoma, in kind of the mountains. Spoiler alert, they grow a lot of wines for Napa and Sonoma in that area. And we are going to be talking about those wines. If you have trouble finding Amador wines, El Dorado Hills, even Lodi, like there's a bunch of other places that are surrounding
Sierra
that.
Foothills, if you see something that says Sierra Foothills can actually also encompasses Amador, I believe, right?
At least it's very close, if not the same. So Sierra Foothills, basically we're talking like Northern California, east of Napa and Sonoma, basically anything over there. So If you can find one of those, great. If not, all wines are welcome here. Bring whatever you can. We're going to do a deep dive into this really cool region that Britt and I actually have spent a lot of time in ourselves just because we like to go up there. So.
The winemaker is for End of Nowhere, in case you see that out there and you want to drink one of his wines. His name is Chris Walsh. Hopefully he'll be on. I think he will. We're pretty sure he will. But anyway, End of Nowhere are the wines that he's producing. So definitely take a look for that if you can find it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any in San Diego that I have found from him, but there should be other wines in the area from other people in the area. So
Turley. If you see a Turley wine, it probably came from there.
Turley, yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. So we'll post some information about it. And then shortly after that, we'll be posting our next whole May schedule. And we're so happy to have you here. Can't wait to see you next week.
As always, Caitlin.
Stay thirsty.
Stay thirsty.
Oh, enthusiastic with my.
Oh no, our song went out again.
Oh no, we don't know how to dance without music.
I can just hum it. Follow us on Instagram, _taste_wine. Tell your friends, start a watch party. Let's blow this shit up.
Maybe scared everyone away.